Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising. As we begin our session today, I want to contemplate the importance of pilgrimage because we're going to be looking at a pilgrimage that Ubiquity University and two of our graduate students are preparing for India this fall and in September. And so I want to begin by just noting the extraordinary turbulence in our world. I read earlier this morning here in Washington, D.C., that because of what the Trump administration has done to strip the Internal Revenue Service down, they're estimating possibly $500 billion in taxes may not be gathered, at least not for now, until the IRS figures out how to maintain its momentum with a decimation of its staff, many of whom have been there for many, many years and have the kind of institutional memory any bureaucracy needs in order to effectively serve the public. There's a tax on the Social Security Administration with equal devastating effect. People are being taken off the rolls that have been getting Social Security for many, many years. A huge percentage of the American public are over 65 years old. And so there's a consternation internationally. We find equal levels of uncertainty. Trump is doubling down about seizing Greenland and sending a U.S. delegation over the objections of the Greenlanders and the Greenland Prime Minister. So as we experience our world at almost every level, there's uncertainty and increasing chaos. This is the perfect time to make pilgrimage. This is the opportune moment to plan for a journey away from time, space, and causality and all the stresses of your world, my world, and go somewhere sacred. And for a certain limited period of time, turn off your cell phones, immerse yourself in that which is divine, and remember who we are most essentially as conscious spiritual beings. As I look back on over 20 years as president of Ubiquity University, I would say that without a doubt, one of the most important decisions that I made was to create an annual pilgrimage to Chartres in France. And we're celebrating our 20th anniversary as we go back to Chartres this July. I've spoken about it many times. I'll put the link actually in the chat box. We're going to be immersing ourselves for 7 days and 7 nights in the divine feminine in that sacred place. And as I contemplate my life, as I look over my shoulder, I always find that I resist the pilgrimage almost every year because I tell myself I'm too busy. But I know I'm going to go. And then once I'm there, all the issues that I thought were more important than immersing myself in the sacred melt away. And then when I emerge 7 days later, I feel refreshed. I feel deepened. I feel more whole. And the issues that I thought were so important before I entered the pilgrimage process have tended to melt away, and some of them I can't even remember because they actually didn't matter. And I realized that most of the stress was right in my head, reinforced by the anxiety of my heart, who was listening to my head. So in this year of 2025, we wanted to add an extra pilgrimage because we feel that this is what our times require of us. Two of our graduate students, Margot Borden and Preeti DeMello, who have lived in India for many, many years. Preeti as an Indian national, Margot as an American national who has spent decades in India. They proposed a pilgrimage to honor the different faces of the feminine. And I know of no nation on earth that has more deeply immersed itself in the multidimensionality of the sacred feminine than the complexio that is known to us as Hinduism have developed over thousands and thousands of years. Arguably, the Indian subcontinent and the peoples that have lived there have curated the sacred and the feminine longer than maybe any other place on earth. That's arguable. There have been many sites on earth, but the Indian subcontinent has in many ways been the mother lode of humanity since of the numinous. So the opportunity to make pilgrimage there is something that I hope all of you will entertain. And those of you who've never been to India, it's an extraordinary place. I've been there many times, and I love it each time that I go. So welcome to Humanity Rising, everyone. It's always a pleasure to greet you, whatever world conditions, and to make available to all of us the opportunities that are inherent in our crises, and pilgrimage is certainly one of them. So I'd like to welcome Margot and Preeti to open their videos and take themselves off mute and join us. And I will turn the program over to them. And they're going to have a PowerPoint presentation. And then when they're done, I'll circle back in as usual. And we'll have a dialogue for the balance of the time. And then they'll both join the after chat when we adjourn the formal meeting. So Margot, Preeti, welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. So I'm going to start with a little video to give you a taste of India.
Satyamai Parame Anandamai Chaitanyamai Satyamai Parame Anandamai Chaitanyamai Satyamai Parame Anandamai Chaitanyamai Satyamai Parame सत्यमयी परमे अनंतमयी चैतन्यमयी सत्यमयी परमे चैतन्यमयी सत्यमयी परमे आनंदमयी चैतन्यमयी सत्यमयी परमे
Since the day Preeti and I met in Mumbai, we really became spiritual sisters and pilgrimage partners. And for the last 15 years, we've been walking together on many fronts and in many dimensions. We would like to start by sharing some memories of our past pilgrimages with you. So Preeti, if you'll, yeah. So we visited some 64 yogini temples with various groups of women where we practice rituals and chants and really just tune into these sacred and mostly forgotten and isolated temples from an ancient era honoring the divine feminine. In these temples, we did many rituals and spent time as a sisterhood. We realized in the silence the power of these temples, which are actually spiritual portals, powerful places for the divine feminine. And we also, coming up, here's the Kumbh Mela in 2015 that we attended together with the beautiful and fascinating people from so many traditions within India. And here you can stop there, Preeti. So we've attended two pilgrimages or been part of two pilgrimages that were not in India. And one was Chartres that we attended. Well, I've been attending every year for 4 years, and Preeti, I think it was 2 years ago. The other one was, as you can see, we joined Heather Ash Amara, a beloved member of our community that many of you know, for her Day of the Dead retreat in Teotihuacan, Mexico. And it was during this retreat that Purna pilgrimage was born. We were sitting in our room having some quiet time, and we were both really good at giving each other space and just going silent. And as we were there in our silence, Preeti started talking. And all of a sudden I realized Preeti was in a trance and she was just speaking out, and it was instructions, spiritual guidance on the divine feminine and on our being called to teach on the divine feminine and guide and teach, yeah. And she spoke for a good 45 minutes, and thank God I typed really fast. And we sat afterwards and we just marveled at what had happened, because it was a spiritual guide and dear friend of hers who had just passed away and was speaking to us through her, and giving us instruction on that we should be teaching on the divine feminine and restore and honor the divine feminine. So we committed there and then to facilitate a yearly pilgrimage focused on the divine feminine. And we were inspired to hold this pilgrimage during the Hindu festival of Navratri. It's an ancient traditional festival. The Hindu festival of Navratri occurs 4 times a year, but the most well-known one is in September, well, this year, because of the lunar calendar, it changes. But it's auspicious to be giving this talk today because we're entering into the preparatory phase for the spring Navratri, which heralds the arrival of spring, symbolizing rejuvenation, fertility, and new beginnings. And how does that speak to us about where we're at in the world today? Really the need for these for rejuvenation. Just share a daily practice for this spring celebration of Navratri is to write something down every day, something you want to change or improve or something new you wish to create. And you write it in red ink because red is auspicious for Hindus. And every day when you practice your spiritual practice, your rituals, you offer your daily writing to your altar, to the gods and goddesses on your altar. And as Jim evoked earlier, pilgrimage is about dedicating a time in which we disengage from the ordinary and cultivate our spiritual lives. Pilgrimages are also journeys to crossover places, or tirat, where we go within, rejuvenate, and then go back into our lives and make the changes to which we aspire. So we bring it down into concrete change. While we can do pilgrimage at home, going to a designated place, or even better, a sacred place, we leave behind our daily habits and open the gateway for deep transformation.
Thank you, Margot. So what I'm going to do is actually dive a little deeper into the tradition of the East, commonly termed as Hindu or Hinduism. And the reason this idea is important for us to bring forth is maybe one, for a wee bit of correction, and the other to really know what this term stands for. So the word Hindu actually has a geographical connotation. It comes from the Persian pronunciation of Sindhu, which was actually the Indus River. And those who come, I say we as an I, for those of us who come from that region, we were called Hindus or Indus, eventually by the sheer geography of the area. And this area is essentially India and Pakistan, which is also Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Now, when Persian-speaking Muslim rulers arrived there, they continued to refer to this region as a geographical designation. And under the British rule, which was the colonial period, an unfortunate time in our history as Indians, we were called the Hindus. This was not an ethnic or religious identifier, so to speak, but the term stayed to an extent that anybody who was non-Christian, non-Muslim, non-Jain were called Hindus. And ironically, the term stuck. The real expression actually for this practice of wisdom, or this wisdom school, is Sanatan Dharma. And Sanatan Dharma is essentially an eternal set of principles which are applicable to all of humanity. When Jim was speaking about the current times, I was thinking how appropriate is this idea of Sanatan Dharma in today's day and age, because it speaks to central concepts. And the central concepts in very simple language are that there is a universal consciousness, a greater sensibility, which we call the cosmos. Within that is the individual self. And in Sanskrit, we call that individual self Ansh. Ansh, which is not on the screen, but Ansh primarily means a part of. So a little part of the universal consciousness breaks off and has this human experience, and thus the reference is individual soul or self or Atma. Now, this human form has to experience life on the planet, or maybe elsewhere, which I believe is true, through the law of cause and effect, which in Sanatan Dharma we refer to as karma. And yet at the same time, there is a set of norms, a cosmic order that is provided so that this can promote good living for all and a universal set of norms that might actually help elevate the human experience as well as further our spirituality. The big idea is that Sanatana Dharma believes that the process of birth and rebirth is deeply connected to who we are, what we experience, and thus the law of cause and effect. And once we break free from that, we actually go merge with that divine universal consciousness. Now, timeless universal principles, approximately 5,000 years old, have absolutely no cultural or regional lenses, except for the fact that these were practiced by people that came from beyond the Indus River, known as Hindus. Now, this term Hindu has commonly stayed with all of the world, but I would like to clarify that Sanatana Dharma is a nicer and more Puritan expression to use. And when we say Hindu, we do mean Sanatana Dharma, but we could also mean more than that, because every religion also has a political element and a political connotation. So from that, a quick recap of what Sanatana Dharma might be. Important to say it's multifaceted. It speaks to both individual growth as well as collective harmony. It does not promote any conversion, which means anybody can practice it. It's essentially a way of life. And thus, we were never a religious order. Emphasizes universal principles that guide us as human beings towards spiritual fulfillment, regardless of our cultural background. And yet, there are some really interesting norms that speak to this. One of them is the idea of Brahman and how we are in a state of being where we seek the idea of moksha. Moksha being nirvana, as commonly known in the Western world, moksha being more of a Sanskrit word, but essentially saying, I am free, I am liberated. And I'm liberated while I'm in this physical form through achieving four aims. One is living through a set of principles. And here's the interesting part, that Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism, for just ease of expression, is a very practical format and framework of living. It says live well, earn well, create prosperity, do it through honest means, make sure that all the legitimate desires or worldly pleasures of human life are experienced, again, through righteous means, and seek liberation as a human being. The main purpose is to cultivate self-realization, which I have to admit is phenomenally a wonderful principle. It speaks about our divine nature. It says, you know what, I am the body and yet not. There is more to me. I'm an aspect of the divine, and thus the divine itself. I remember when I was a little girl, my grandmother would get us to pray, and one of the things she would say is visualize this golden being. And as we would visualize the golden being and she would walk us through the meditation, she would bring us face to face with the golden being and she would say, now see your face. And that is the idea of Sanatana Dharma. We are the divine, and our true divine nature is beyond the human experience as well as the physical body and ego. And thus, living in harmony with that cosmic order is what allows us to follow the path of doing right for all. And thus, we can manage both ourselves as well as our ecosystem. Sanatana Dharma also gives us stages of life, which is another interesting way to try and to understand what stage we might be at. So brahmacharya would be a student, a grihasth would be somebody who has a householder's life and thus has responsibilities of a certain kind. And the norms and rules for each one are different. Vanaprastha is 60 and beyond usually, which is saying, all right, now I am beginning to think of increased spiritual focus. The term vanaprastha has a very interesting meaning. It means somebody who's walking into the woods is now leaving for the forest. And finally is renunciation, which is sannyasa. My rationale for sharing this with you is to say that the logic of this way of being called Sanatana Dharma Hinduism is very striking. It allows us in the modern day, with all the complexities in the world, with depolarization, is to stand for a solid, good framework rather than have to take any side, and just essentially to listen to ourselves really, really deeply. Hindus practice nonviolence, truth with kindness, which is an interesting take on truth in itself. Absence of exploitation, absence of possessiveness, and self-discipline. And we believe that going beyond knowledge and the intellectual and bringing ourselves, our consciousness, to a place of direct experience is the best format of elevating our spiritual understanding of ourselves as well as of the greater divine. Why are we here? We are here for universal welfare. The purpose of Sanatana Dharma is to serve each other. And that is only possible through serving the self through the dharmic principles of Sanatana Dharma. Now, here is where it gets really interesting. So we are saying essentially is human fulfillment is equal to divine fulfillment. And thus, what do we need to look at? And the various formats, we are picking one, which is essentially the foundation of it all, and it's called Purna, which is why the pilgrimage in itself is called Purna. Purna rests on the concept of Shiva and Shakti, which is the divine feminine and the divine masculine. Again, this is extremely critical and important for us as Hindus, as well as for us actually as humanity, is to see two profound and interconnected aspects of self that need to come together as the foundation of how we will move forward. So this idea and this connection between the Shiva-Shakti dynamic is, and if you notice this visual on the side, it's half woman, half man. And the idea is not to say it's androgynous, it says each one of us has both. We all manifest within us the masculine and the feminine. And are we aware of that aspect of self, and how do we leverage it? So the Shiva principle primarily says pure consciousness, the witness, the greater potential, and stillness, the unchanging ground of being, formless awareness, often described as masculine, but not through the lens of gender, more through this lens of the state of being as well as the principles it carries. And the association here is with liberation and transcendence. Shakti, on the other hand, the feminine principle, is about movement, is about energy, it's about activation, is about action, is about manifestation. And thus, the Shiva principle needs the Shakti principle to activate it. Even silence needs to be activated. Without Shakti, there is no silence, there is nothingness. And as she comes in, as the feminine principle comes in without and beyond gender, she activates the Shiva energy. This brings basically everything into being and is associated with creation, with innovation, with manifestation of all energy that exists. When the two come together, we come to completeness. And that is the absolute wholeness, which is complete, and there is no lack. This perfect completeness that includes all possibilities, beyond duality, is also the ultimate goal of spiritual seeking in human life. If you look at what's happening in the world today, you would be able to actually talk about the misinterpretation of the Shiva principle, of the masculine principle, and you would also say which one is over-leveraged. Without going further, I think it'd be important to know which might also be ignored in the moment. Our focus as a team of practitioners, Margot and I, we focus on the divine feminine. And our focus really says, how do we activate, how do we energize the creative power of cosmic energy so that the greater whole can be served? And the divine feminine principle primarily says, one, complementary to the masculine principle, and both are required. This creative force is so critical that without this, the masculine principle would be static and unable to create. How phenomenal is that? It also speaks to duality in non-duality within duality. And what does that mean? It basically says that in the within the framework of practice for Shaktism, which is the feminine, both Shiva and Shakti, the masculine and feminine, are actually one. They're not two. They are consciousness and energy that are inseparable. And yet, as human beings, when we live our lives, we separate the two, we genderize them, and then we find a way of living that might not speak to the entire whole. And because the whole is not served, there are issues. And in fact, Hindu scholars say that a lot of what is happening in the world today is happening primarily because there is an overemphasis on the masculine with neglect to the divine feminine. So this cosmic dance of Shiva and Shakti, of the masculine and the feminine, is an important one for us to know and understand because, and this is a beautiful quote that comes from one of our texts where we say that Shiva without Shakti, the masculine without the feminine, is actually not living. It's a corpse. And thus, consciousness needs energy to express, and energy needs consciousness to direct. Navratri comes at a point every year, 4 times a year, when there are seasonal transitions, a time to re-emerge, to address what might be hidden, a time to address what might be invisible, bring the natural forces in so that we individuals, we human beings can transform. This is seen as a very powerful time for spiritual practice and is a time for intensive reflection on the process of change, what we want to bring into our lives, what we want to correct, what we want to manifest, and so on and so forth. If we manage to do that, the promise is this, that we will experience bliss through deep absorption of divine principles and be liberated while living. And what essentially happens through that is there's integration rather than renunciation. We don't need to leave the world. Margot said this beautifully in the beginning, we don't need to live in a cave. Actually, real spiritual practice is when we are living in the world and being able to engage through the right principles that are essentially good for all, and that leads to fulfillment. That is true fulfillment. How do we balance these opposites of Shiva and Shakti so that we can bring them to fulfillment or wholeness? This is conscious creation, which means meaningful participation in life rather than making our way without thinking. And recognizing that actually the divine feminine and the divine masculine are in a deep relationship with each other, which is interdependent based on the cosmic principles of the universe. And thus, this is embodied spirituality, learning to live like that on a daily basis. That is the promise of Navratri. And that is the promise of coming into our own wholeness and coming into a place where we understand that this expression of self is essentially a way of being on an everyday basis. A quick story. If you see this image to the right, so like Jim mentioned, I live in India. I am an Indian, and I've grown up in this tradition. There was a time about 15 odd years back that I had a dream. And in my dream, I had the Divine Mother say to me, bring me home. And I remember thinking to myself, like, all right, I'm clearly talking to myself and there's something going on with me. As it so happened, I, at that time, worked in the corporate sector. I shot off on a trip to the Philippines. And on my way back, I was seeing a friend in Thailand who lived in a small village. And that evening that I landed in Thailand and I got to my friend's village, we went for a walk to the flea market. And there was this gorgeous old woman who had a sort of a crate, like a little box of metal goods. And I found myself doing the oddest thing. I found myself diving into that box of metal goods and pulling out this image that you see on the screen. And this is a rendition of Shakti with her foot on Shiva. And the idea here is not, she's not suppressing him. It's in a way saying that I energize Shiva to come to life. So very personal image. And if you do come to the pilgrimage, you will experience and see her as well. Quick word on Navratri. Navratri essentially means 9 nights, and 9 nights of celebration of the divine feminine. This happens in deep cosmic alignment, which offers transformation, occurs many times a year, as Margot shared, 4 times, and at the change of seasons. In this time when we sort of go into reflection, through a deeply structured process, we believe the transformation manifests as appropriate. Having said that, we do bring our desires to the transformation process and say, this is what I'd like to change. I remember working with somebody who said, I'd like to dissolve my anger. I would like to dissolve judgment. I would like to manifest sweetness in my heart. I would like to manifest a companion who I can walk the rest of my journey with. And it's so interesting that it happens for sure. When it happens is a hard one to tell. But I have noticed deep transformation and change happen through this time. Now, Hindu cosmology sees this entire process as an ongoing process where we create, we maintain, we dissolve, and then we create again. And through the process of Shaktism, we come to a place of prominent transformation. These 9 nights are, in a way, we say we go back into the cosmic womb. They're the 9 cycles of creation, the 9 levels of consciousness, and the 9 sensibilities of self. So another quick, another aspect, actually, a quick take on this is the way we see the progression of Navratri is each day is dedicated to a different goddess. And the first 3 days are about what do I need to clean up. The 4th to the 6th day is about what do I need to create. And finally, how do I illumine myself? How do I bring brightness into my being? There is a color significance to each day. And we wear a different color every day. We dress up differently every day, and we pray differently every day. There's a different chant, there's different food, and each goddess actually reveals specifically different qualities of the divine feminine that are equally important to the divine masculine. But because she is the energy of activism, we bring her in with force. There is also a tantric aspect to this, which is to say this is how we activate our kundalini or our chakras or our energy centers. And the way we do it is to recognize the correlation, which you would experience when you arrive, is that the first 3 days are the lower chakras. The next 3 days are the heart and communication chakra, which is the center chakras. And the final 2 days are your divine chakras, which are the third eye and the crown. The reason I share this is that there is a lot of layering to the process. This is not a simple learn this and get that kind of knowledge. This is an experiential knowledge. And as you experience yourself through the lens of the body, the mind, the spirit, the soul, you learn to engage with different aspects of self that lead you into that higher dimension. And you also get to correlate that with different forms of the goddess and how each phase through the 9 days awakens our sense of self. I'm going to invite Margot to speak to some of the very key practical and spiritual implications of Navratri. And Margot, over to you. You're on mute, Margot.
Yes. Navratri really, it's practical wisdom. It's also mystical. It's multidimensional. But on the practical level, we're invited really to explore the power of our innate spirituality through operating in the world and not retreating to a cave, as we've said earlier. So we come to understand that divine energy, Shakti, arises from and returns to Purna, completeness. Purna is the cosmic whole. And divine energy rises from the wholeness and then returns to it. So we recognize the beauty of this cycle, and we, as spiritual beings having a human experience, are part of that divine energy. However, it's for us to embody and leverage Shakti. She's a potential lying dormant within us that is up to us to bring to our awareness and bring to fruition in all aspects and dimensions of our lives. So she's within us and waiting to be awakened. We ultimately aspire toward integrating both the stillness and witnessing while experiencing, while the dynamic creative aspect of the human journey, which is really the spiritual practice of the Vedas. So the contemporary relevance of Navratri is in honoring the divine feminine during the festival of Navratri. We're called to balance being and doing and stillness and action, as I said a moment ago. So in our meditations and rituals and reflections, we connect to the wholeness. And from within that wholeness, we gain a new understanding of action, an action animated by and not disconnected from the universal divine feminine. So what actions, if we want to think about it, what actions does the universal divine feminine request of us? How do these inner-driven actions feel to our being? And can we feel the difference between that and our habitual way of being and doing? How do our individual and collective lives look and feel when our consciousness and actions are driven by outer goals and ambitions or quests for power, recognition, and other outer-driven forces? So to contrast, we explore the beautiful dance between being and doing, receptivity and action. And I like to use the expression, and doing from a place of being. Ultimately, we come to an understanding of the wholeness or Purna beyond the dualities of Shakti and Shiva. So, and then we come to the psychological dimension, which is really a framework for transformation. So phase one is about confronting the aspects of ourselves that are invisible, unseen, but they're very present, and actually sometimes more present than the seen, running things of the unaddressed aspects of ourselves. We meet ourselves where we are and address the shadow and the ego. Phase two is about reconstructing and building new patterns for self-realization and spiritual advancement. And phase three is integration or consolidating all the aspects of self and our relationship to the cosmic whole. So we're not isolated. This provides us with a structure and acknowledges that we need both destructive and creative forces for our psycho-spiritual evolution. Going through this journey as a group also provides us support for our transformation. We go in together as a group and do this journey and share and hold space and support one another. And also hearing everyone else's stories, we recognize we're not alone. We're part of one human body. The Jungian process of individuation, transpersonal psychologies, concept of spiritual emergence, and also modern trauma healing models all reflect this similar journey to what we're talking about here. And perceiving this journey as cyclical rather than linear is inherently feminine. It eliminates the toxic ways we should ourselves. I should be at this level. I haven't achieved this yet. Well, there's nothing to achieve. There's consciously being in the cycle of inner and outer and growth and evolution. And so it's a gentle invitation to the timeless journey of both inner and outer development. Preeti, you're muted.
The expression that comes to mind is this process invites us to embrace the appropriateness of our individual and specific journeys, which might not be the same as the other. Or to your earlier comment on the shoulds, there are no shoulds. This is about saying each one of us is on a specific path. That path is still emerging. And when we recognize that path is appropriate to us, we embrace it and then work with it. It's meeting yourself where you're at. So balancing the inner masculine and the divine feminine, bringing in both as cycles and rhythms of life, alternating between action, receptivity, between intuitive intelligence and analytical intelligence, recognizing that structure, logic, protection, as well as flow intuition and nurturing are all critical to us. Navratri centers us. It brings us into that place of seeing who we are and what we need to do. It essentially asks us to invite wholeness into our being so that we can operate from there, so that we can do from there. Even from this session, even from this time that we've spent together, what would your daily meditation be on a specific goddess aspect? And these are things that we will speak of when we meet as well. What does a color stand for? What might be the intentions that you might bring? What kind of an altar would you create if you were in this space? And thus learning to work with what is available and what we're receiving from the lens of the divine feminine from this specific tradition is a transformative experience because it gives us a structured step-by-step way of being with attention to how we're thinking, what we're eating, how we dress our body, what we evoke, what sound do we emerges from our throat, and thus the chanting that comes up. And we also attend to what are we dreaming. We then, of course, journal and make this as contemporary and as real as possible. This is a universal message. There is a uniqueness to the tradition and the format, but the message here is to me, potentially the same as the message I received in Shastra, which is the divine feminine is essential for wholeness. And whatever the tradition may be, these traditions actually speak to the greater whole. That greater idea of Purna, where both creation and destruction are required to help us emerge or evolve into our own selves. The invitation that I have for you as we close our time together today is, where might you be in your own cycle of transformation? Do you have a goddess energy that you feel like cultivating, that you're invited to cultivate? And how can you honor cycles and rhythms in your life? What are you attending to? What might you be missing? What are the principles that you would like to live by? I'm going to invite Jim to please come back on, and thank you so very much for listening to Margot and me. Jim, over to you.
Thank you both. I learned a lot just taking in your remarks over the last couple of minutes. And I'd like to just start by just describing a little bit more detail for people having it in Goa and sort of what's the plan for the days.
So there is a link that has been put into the chat, which I will repost But the plan really is this, that we all arrive, we have an 11-day pilgrimage. We all arrive in Goa essentially a day before and leave a day after. The first day is in preparation of self because we would have traveled from different parts of the world. We need to bring our consciousness together. And the beauty of this idea of pilgrimage is the togetherness. I have experienced it with Ubiquity over and over again. And I know that when I've gone alone for a pilgrimage, it has worked beautifully. But when we do it together, it's entirely different. This pilgrimage will be held in the city and state of Goa, essentially at a location which is close to the water and very potent with divine feminine energy. Every day we will focus on the myth, the mysticism, the spirituality, the psychology, and the practical aspects of every version of the divine feminine. You will experience 9 versions of the divine feminine vibrate there, and we will follow the rituals that support that emergence, which is all the Vedic rituals, the Sanatan Dharma, the Hindu rituals. I hope I've answered your question, Jim.
Sure. Goa is such a beautiful part on the western coast of India. If I remember, it used to be a Portuguese colony. What is it about Goa that attracted both of you to designate the pilgrimage there? And in particular, what's the frequency or the resonance in Goa around the divine feminine that you find so illuminating?
Margot, do you want to take that or shall I?
I'm going to let you, since you're based in Goa and we've spent a lot of time together there.
Yes. So, well, one is Goa's home to me, but that's not the reason. Goa is seen and experienced as the seat of Shanta Durga, which is the calm Durga, Durga being the activated form of the divine feminine. And during the times of the Portuguese invasion, Shanta Durga was moved from one location to another. And when you go there, you will experience her original temple as well as the temple she was relocated to. She is the presiding goddess, and all her versions are experienced there. One of the aspects that we have designed in our curriculum is a visit to a village where we will experience Shanta Durga through the night during Navratri. She is the mother goddess in different versions, practiced under different names in different villages of Goa. Ours would be the idea of Shanta Durga.
Anything you want to add, Margot?
Yeah, I just want to bring out some practical aspects as a Westerner who's been coming and going from India since 1991 and lived there for the last 11 years until recently, that it can be, a little, people can have an impression and it can be a little intimidating. And so what we've done is we have a team on site. And from the moment your flight lands until the moment you leave India, everything is taken care of. So the pilgrimage is all inclusive, and we have some extracurricular activities that people can sign up for. And anybody who wants to travel either before or after the pilgrimage, we have people to get you organized and make sure, that you're. So we really wanted this to be almost like, a cocooning you and holding you through whatever you want, whatever India wants to be for you, if you wanted to experience India outside of the pilgrimage. But it's really, we're creating a cocoon to go inward together as a community, as brothers and sisters on a spiritual pilgrimage. And it's the 21st of September till the 1st of October, later this year. And we have, we're currently in early bird pricing until the 15th of May. And on the 15th of May, the price is going to go up by 15%. So we encourage you strongly to take advantage of the best price we can get, which is for an 11-day pilgrimage. We feel it's pretty reasonable.
And the aspect of the feminine, I want to talk about the feminine a little bit because there's so many dimensions of it. You know, you've been to Chartres, both of you. There have been other places. What would be, maybe starting with you, Preeti, what would be the essential quality of the feminine in Goa that people should know about?
Interesting
As
question.
say contrasted to Chartres. So, you know, the feminine in Chartres, for example, is really about birthing. It's the regenerative aspects of the feminine. And that is embedded in the cathedral. It's everywhere you look and feel her presence. So that when one kind of comes into Goa, you describe the different aspects, but try to tease out the essential quality that people could possibly prepare for or look forward to.
I want to jump in, Preeti,
Mhm.
and precede you because I've spent a lot of time in Goa. I have been to every tiny corner and nook and cranny of Goa, and there's a softness and an enveloping nature of Goa that is unlike anywhere else in India, and it's it's otherworldly. I don't know how to describe what it's from, but I think do you see? There's something magical,
I
It's a
would,
soft quality. It's a very soft quality.
soft and enveloping.
and if I may present a polarity to that, which is also true, is we refer to Goa as she. And we believe that her energy is incredible for radical change. She has the force within to destroy falsehood while rebirthing the new. And upholding the two is what Goa is, or the divine feminine in Goa is. The land in itself has been through colonization, had a fair amount of brutality that has happened on that piece of land. But the interesting thing about Sanatan Dharma and about Goa is that she has advocated that all that has happened in the past is irrelevant. We are here to birth the new. And it happens through collective measure. It does not happen through just individual effort. When we come together as a community, when we come together as people, and our collective practice, or what we call sangha or satsang, or the idea of deep engagement with our community, allows us to birth the new for ourselves individually and the collective whole. That I would say that those would be the two unique aspects: radical energy to change while holding the softness.
Yeah, well, I think that's, you know, an essential quality of the whole Hindu understanding of the feminine in a way, because there's no aspect that's more fierce than Kali and Durga in her fierce aspects. And, you know, that doesn't really exist in the same way in the Christian tradition, for example, or the Jewish tradition, where you have, I would say, a more benign notion with Mary, mother of Jesus, and so forth, even Mary Magdalene. The Black Madonnas are more chthonic in a way, but nothing compares to the fierceness of the Indian notions of the feminine. It's quite extraordinary. Some of the stories and iconographies of the darker side of the feminine. So when you're saying there's a polarity, that I think is something that people wouldn't naturally experience very many other places on Earth, to my
That's
knowledge. I may be wrong, obviously, but to my knowledge.
No, you're not wrong at all. In fact, you're on point. And we sometimes mistake them as darker forces, but they're basically the idea of the divine feminine in Sanatana Dharma Hinduism says, get a hold of things to change them. We are not, even our girls are not brought up or to be benign beings, to not only be nurturing. We are invited to step into our power. And as we step into our power, the invitation then is to address the shadow, to address the ego, to direct communities, to make sure that we take our place as stakeholders of the good. And the deep belief is dualism is a big concept in the practice, to recognize that the idea of masculine to the neglect of feminine, or for that matter, the idea of the feminine to the neglect of the masculine, is half an idea. It's only when the two come together. And thus, the feminine always manifests the masculine, which is a radical change. And the masculine always manifests the feminine, which is nurturing and creative and softness, both being critical.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Anything you want to add, Margot?
Not to that, no.
Then,
Really,
as we bring this to a close, then well, let's talk a little bit more about the pilgrimage itself. As I think really importantly for people who haven't been to South Asia for a while, this is a turnkey operation. All you do, if I understand it, is you just show up in Goa. You got to get yourself to Goa. You can fly there from a variety of places around the world. You might want to go to Delhi first and then down to Goa. But once you come to get to Goa and you get off the airplane, everything's taken care of till you get back on the airplane 9 days later. That's basically it, right?
that's right. Yeah, we really wanted it to be an enveloping and
Yeah.
experience that you don't have to navigate the ordinary. We leave the ordinary behind and enter into pilgrimage the minute we land.
Yeah. Well, that's very similar to Chartres. Once you get to Chartres, you're just enveloped into our 7 day ritual process. And then you just sort of come out the other side and go back to your destiny, wherever that leads you. So that's one thing. And then there was a question about what's the pricing of the early bird special?
So I don't have it in front of my eyes. Preeti, do you have it in front of your eyes? It's the current prices on the website are for either single room or double room. And the current prices on the site are the early bird prices. Can you see them, Preeti? Can you find them? And then on the 15th of May, they go up by 15%. And I've shared the link, but I don't have the numbers in front of my eyes yet.
I could touch upon the numbers. Double occupancy, if you were to share a room with a friend, you would pay $4,448. Single occupancy, if you were to have the space to yourself, would be $5,313. This includes everything but for your tickets to get there.
So all
once
the meals, all the activities, there will be some extracurricular activities offered at an extra fee, but prices in India are pretty reasonable. There'll be Ayurvedic massage, consultations with an Ayurvedic doctor. We'll have an amazing astrologer on site. So in the free periods, there will be opportunities to explore more.
Yeah, so we want to give you an experience which is as Indian can be. As somebody coming from outside the country. But we also want to give you simultaneously a deeply transformative experience, which is to say, we'll have some bit of fun on the side, but you will attend to every aspect of self, which is really body, mind, and spirit. You will learn, you will use your body differently. We have a yoga teacher who we've assigned who will go through different practices, different day. We will have pieces of knowledge. We will invite another scholar or two to speak to some ideas around the divine feminine. You will eat a certain kind of food, which is specific to that day. If you are a vegetarian, you will love it. If you're not a vegetarian, you're invited to try vegetarian plus fish for those few days. Sorry for getting into the specifics, but that's
No,
the
this
way
is good. This is
to start with.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there'll be a specific color you will wear. There will be an experience of dressing yourself up to meet the divine feminine. Even the men, for instance, the first day is white. Means Jim is already dressed for the occasion, and on that day we all wear white. And the men dress a little differently, the women dress a little differently. We're going to try and find a way, if you want to dress in Indian attire, we'll find a way to do that as well. We want to make this fun. We want to make this as authentic and true for you as possible.
And also we'll be doing dream work, similar to what we do in Shakta, and rituals that we'll be practicing, but also learning things that we take home with us. New ways of seeing and being, but also practical practices that we can bring back after the 11 days.
And if you're a student who is doing your master's or your PhD, you get to write a paper. You would have enough references. We will hold your hand before and after to make sure that you can take this to your as an academic accomplishment, along with it being a real life practice. The idea of direct experience to articulation. So, I say this often. People ask me, what's the difference in the East and the West? And I say there are many, but the one is that the East has this incredible wisdom, and the West has this superpower of taking that wisdom and translating it and articulating it in a manner that everybody can get. So this is your time to be able to do that, to present your version of this learning to the world.
Thank you, both. Let's close, starting with you, Preeti, and then you, Margot. Just talk to us about the importance of pilgrimage in your life, and the reason why it's important for people, even under current world conditions, to go to some place like South India, a place called Goa, that many would have never even maybe heard about or been to. Why is this important?
When I was little, my parents, who are both deeply spiritual beings, had this rule. When there was too much chaos, they would say, go think about it. And that basically meant go to your room. And I remember as we grew older, they changed the term and they said, be a pilgrim. Essentially, pilgrimage to me means going away from the everyday chaos of life. And everybody's life has plenty of complexity in general, and in the current times, all our lives are more complex. So a time and a place to withdraw under the guidance of those who might have done this work in the past with specific practices, so that the version that went in is different from the version that emerges. That is pilgrimage, a time of transformation and change, a time of evolution, a time of creating a pathway for self. And it needs us to step away from everyday reality.
Yeah, it's a time of transformation. So how you come out is very different than how you come in. Yes, thank you. Margot.
So what's really important to me, and what I've noticed over the 40 years that I've been doing pilgrimages, I think that's about right, is that we don't realize it, but in our day-to-day lives, we get into action that is not informed by the heart and soul, and we get into this doing and getting stuff done, and our nervous systems and so much inputs, and So the first, when I do my meditation retreats, I spend my first 3 days only watching my breath. I don't speak to anybody. I hardly eat. I hardly do anything. Just watch the breath for 3 days. And I call that my decompression chamber. And go in and there's like a heavy metal concert in your head. And it starts to get into more and more quiet, and you start saying, this is just noise. This looks real, and it takes up a lot of space, but it starts to become unreal and superfluous, and it peels away, and you come down in and you find that silence. And then I maintain that silence for the rest of the retreat. And another thing that I've always done is when I go on retreat or pilgrimage is that I pray for something, some kind of psycho-spiritual growth. And it has never, ever not happened. And so even when I come to Chartres, there's always something in my journal about something I'm asking for. And I remember a particularly strong moment when Andrew Harvey was speaking, and I went into a kind of a trance or something, and came out, and my prayer for that retreat was answered. And it was like, and just releasing patterns and things that feel like they're real or feel like they're your foundations, and you realize this is superfluous, this is conditioning, this is habit, and just walking away from all of it and peeling away the layers and coming down into the depths of ourselves and doing it together. So that's magic for me.
Doing it together. That's so important about pilgrimages, the community aspect of it. You know, you go alone, but you also go together simultaneously. That's very important. Well, thank you both. I look forward to hearing more, and I hope it's a full house. We need to bear in mind the admonition of Preeti's parents that when it gets a little crazy, we all need to stop and think about it and just breathe for a couple days. And that's what we'll be doing in Goa. So thank you both. They're going to join the after chat. You'll see the link to the after chat in the chat box. You received the link in your Zoom reminder for today. And then tomorrow, everyone, we're going to be doing something very special. We're going to be honoring the passing of Jim Hickman. I sent a letter out to everyone. He was the chairman of our board and our chief financial officer, a very close personal friend of mine for over 45 years. And so tomorrow we're going to be gathering people that have known him throughout his life. And we're going to be having a memorial service for Jim Hickman on Humanity Rising. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Preeti. Thank you, Margot. That'll do it for us for today, everyone. See you tomorrow. Bye for now.
Thank you.